it's not.
Okay, we've done this several times today, where someone gets up on the stage, says, Salam alaikum, and everyone's quiet. And then he has to ask again. So let's get it right the first time. Salam alaikum wa rahmatullah. That's better. Maybe the coffee helped, right? Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone who's following this from a distant location that you can send your questions, and I'm hoping this session is going to be different. We're going to give most of the time to audience interaction. So if you're following this in a distant location, let me remind you, you can either send questions in through the live stream or through the Twitter hashtag. Just to remind you, that's hashtag Sharq Conf, C-O-N-F 17. Hashtag Sharq Conf, that's C-O-N-F 17. So I want questions from people here and people who may be following this from elsewhere. We've sat through a lot of conference sessions, right? Last couple of days. Overall, it's been pretty awesome. But you know what? I do a lot of public speaking by virtue of my position as a presenter in Al Jazeera International. But pulling off a good conference session, I think, is not a done deal. It's a bit like you could say pulling off a good marriage. And there's a wise man once told me, there's one secret to a good marriage. I wish I knew it was a secret. I wish it wasn't, he could have told me. But this is what I do know. Communication and feedback is important, right? So we've got a big title for this session. We're talking about the future of the Sharq region, the Islamic world, economics, business, youth. If we just threw in there maybe sports and arts, we would have covered everything possible to cover in the world. And culture, thank you. So when they told me that, I wrote out, all these questions probably could be a PhD thesis. And I was talking with Dr. Tariq, and he said, oh my God, when I saw your questions, I told him, you know what, you're right, man. So we can either have a deep philosophical debate in which you hear to my boring voice for hours, and I'll read through all my little points. That's option A. Or we can do this. And we can turn this into an interactive session where we talk more about your questions. Because I think you came here to interact. So let's do that, yeah? Good. So now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to bear with us for only 2 minutes. I'm going to invite, first of all, our speakers up to the stage. We're delighted to have with us Mr. Tariq Yusuf. He's the director of Brookings in the Doha Center. Please come up. And we're equally honored to have with us Yavuz Fatahoglu. He's the seventh chairman of Musaid Youth Council. I had the pleasure of chatting with these two gentlemen just before the session. They have a wealth of experience in managing, helping, participating, nurturing, and incubating all kinds of youth projects and initiatives. I think that's more interesting. So what I'm going to ask them to do is I'm going to ask each of them to speak, first of all, for just 2 minutes. After they speak for 2 minutes, I'll get it kicked off with a question or two, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions from you. We've got 2 ushers in the room who have microphones. Can you put your hands up? I think Naseem. Where is Naseem? There we go. And there's the lady there. Okay, they've got mics. Put your hands up again for me. There we go.
He knows.
And there's Nassim, he's in the middle. Okay, so if you've got some questions, just put your hand up and they'll get a mic to you. And if you're watching, like I said, from a distant location, don't hold back. We want you to be included too. So send your questions in either through, like I said, the live stream or hashtag SharqConf17. All right, without further ado, let's hear from Mr. Yavuz Fatahoğlu. 2 minutes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a really big pleasure to be with you and all this great audience and a privilege to represent my ex-council, we can say, but also the Turkish youth in the name of the entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs. The thing that I will remark through this big audience, especially to our youth of the region, the most important topic is, I think, the unity of the countries and the nations of this region. So I will also like to go through this bigger topic in the 4 stages of our speech, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice, short and sweet, but to the point. So we're going to pick up more with Yavuz and unity especially. Go ahead as well. Let us welcome an intro note from Mr. Tariq.
Okay. Thank you, Sami, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here today, especially amongst all the youth. There's a lot of positive energy. I have listened to a lot of presentations in the last 2 days, especially this morning presentations that spoke about the space for entrepreneurship, the opportunities for youth to become entrepreneurs, and the role of technology in all of this. What I'll try to do, inshallah, as we go into the question and answer session, is to try to maybe highlight other dimensions of entrepreneurship that I think are equally important, equally viable, especially needed in our societies. This is about entrepreneurship in the Sharq region, a region where Sami gave us yesterday 10 questions that talked about dislocation, instability, volatility. This context creates a lot of areas of needs where entrepreneurship can be especially important. Education, transportation, health, political activism. These sorts of entrepreneurship models, call it social entrepreneurship, call it political entrepreneurship, in my humble opinion, is as important and as rewarding and as needed. And I think many of you in the room here come from countries where you can play a very vital role in the coming period to not just only be entrepreneurs making profit, but entrepreneurs also serving society and serving larger goals. Thank you.
All right, I'm loving this session already. Thank you very much. We're really getting to the point of communication here. Just a reminder, start thinking of your questions. I'm going to open the floor in a second to give you an opportunity to ask them, and I do want to hear many questions as possible. Let's get things kicked off, though. At the end of the day, gentlemen, people, especially youth, have come here, and I think the key question on people's minds is, we're in a region that is changing. Everybody knows that. Traditional power structures are crumbling. Something new is arising. We haven't even figured out what that is yet. What opportunity does that pose for me as a young person is the question. We often, in the post-Arab Spring part of this region, I think now there's sort of a pessimistic view that the hopes and dreams have been dashed. But in every crisis, there is opportunity. What is the opportunity, Yavuz, that you would see for entrepreneurs in a vastly changing and rapidly changing landscape?
It's a very good question. In our region, the change comes with youth, in fact. When you look to the history, every big change came with the young entrepreneurs, young commanders, young politicians. So there is a huge chance for the young people to stay in the center of the management mechanism. But also there is another challenge.
Because the center is crumbling, right?
Yes, the center is crumbling.
How do you stay in the center when you don't know where the center is anymore? Is it the traditional structure of power? Is it an e-center now?
When I look to Africa, for example, there is a very special and interesting point right out there, which is the young people has no possibilities or no advantage when you compare it with the same ages of the young people in the European area or in our region, but they are trying to do something. So this crash, this change drives the young people to push their limits, you know. And for me, if you don't have any struggling, you don't, as a young people, you don't push yourself, you know. And now we have this chance to rethink about our faults, mistakes, and the gaps which we should fill very quickly. And now I believe that the young people in the region really defined these problems very well, and they are having their education on that, having their personal experience.
Look for the gaps and don't be put off by the struggle, basically. Tariq, you spent about 5 years before the Brookings Institute working, helping nurture the youth ventures, right? If you had to break it down, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 of the key ingredients for success, what would they be?
I know the ingredients for success, but I think it's also equally important to highlight the ingredients for failure.
That's a good one. That's good.
The number one lesson from 5 years of working with youth across many countries in the Arab world and writing and thinking about youth and entrepreneurship was that in most cases, youth in the region are both motivated, capable, able to transition from relying on government jobs or family jobs to becoming entrepreneurs, to becoming more engaged, and to find their own opportunities in societies. That's lesson number one. And it's a very important lesson because it suggests a key requirement for success is already present in these countries. But there are at least other areas where we discovered can play an important role in maybe shrinking the opportunities, constraining youth, and that matter.
Like
one
what?
in particular,
give us some
for
ideas.
example, one in particular, while youth are becoming more entrepreneurial, more aware, more skilled, they operate and they find themselves in vast, empty spaces. See, if you remember the presentation, I think from about 2 hours ago, where the word ecosystem was used a lot to explain success in Silicon Valley. The ecosystem was driven by partnerships between government, industry, the academy, and that provided all the support for youth. In a lot of our countries, this ecosystem is non-existent or has to be built.
Or even negative.
Or even negative. So lesson number 2 was you cannot take for granted that aspiring young people who want to be entrepreneurs will be supported within their countries, by their governments, by their societies, or by the academic institutions. We need to work on that. So that's another...
Hang on, that brings something to my mind now, because we've been asking the question in a lot of conferences I've attended, you know, how can you support the youth? How can you help the youth? But should the question be how the youth can help themselves, take the initiative themselves? We had a presentation yesterday where one gentleman started a country as well as right? I mean, do I need to wait for a country to help me, or?
This is only to say, Sami, that while we work on supporting youth and encouraging youth and creating opportunities for youth, we have to be working on, in parallel, on creating the larger environment that will support what they do. Right. And I'm not here asking for the moon. There is a role for foundations to be supportive. There is a role for universities to be supportive. There is a role for government officials to be supportive. Somebody has to take responsibility for doing this. Take one case in point, Sami, and I'll end with this. One of the biggest drivers for success or failure for any entrepreneur is the availability of funding. Who's going to provide the funding? Suppose I'm a young person with a fantastic project that's going to make money, that's going to serve society, that's going to serve the public good at large. If nobody provides me with funding, that project will not succeed. Who's going to provide the funding? Is it another entrepreneur? Is it a financial institution? Is it a government organization? Or is it some foundation? And I think those are some of the issues we need to get into.
Explore.
Yes.
All right, that's enough of us talking. Let's get some questions in from the floor. Okay, we got a gentleman at the front here. Can we get a microphone? Okay, we got a few more hands. I like this. And we're also going to check in with Razan in a minute. So Razan, start scouting cyberspace for us. We'll come to you in a moment. Do you have anything, Razan?
Yes, I have one question from Imtiaz.
All right, let's go with that one then.
Asks, how are MENA governments cutting internal bureaucracy to accelerate development of globally facing startups within the region?
Okay, how are MENA governments? Maybe the question should be, are MENA governments cutting the bureaucracy? Yavuz, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also a very good question because I can connect this with unity. You know, it's not a long year or long period, but after the collapse of the Ottoman state, now we have a lot of states which is separated from each other. So most of them now are energy states, which is taking their national income from the energy products. And we have a really good example, Turkey, which is really putting a big performance on the industrialization because it has no big natural sources. It has to produce something. So our government also, when we compare with the other regions, our government has really put a big performance on that. For example, now the youngsters of the Turkish nation has a very big chance that there is a too big institution which gives a huge investment on their good projects, we can say, or the feasible projects. One is COSGAP, which is giving nearly 100,000 Turkish liras. If you have a good project, when you serve it and when you present it to the council, and if they accept, you get your 100,000 Turkish lira, and that's a quite good money to start a business.
So Tarek asked the question, who's going to provide the funding? Uncle Yavuz is here to help us with that one.
That's for the Turkish nationals, unfortunately only, for now. But of course, we are living in an age that there is a huge potential, international potential, that if you have a good project, I really never seen in my experience, I never seen a project which is really feasible and which can make money that stays out of the funding, you know. So it's very easy to find the money, but you have to build up a good master plan with a feasible project, I can say.
All right, I think the gentleman's been waiting patiently. Let's give him a chance.
Yes. Hi and salam alaikum everybody. My name is Khaldun.
Salam.
Actually, let me pick it up from the point you raised, Liberland. I was just reading.
Everybody liked Liberland presentation.
Yeah, that's why I want to raise the attention.
I have a feeling his website's going to be flooded with applications for citizenship soon.
Okay, maybe. So I was just reading Freud, and I beg your pardon for this analogy, but it is the best analogy that came to my mind when I was hearing and listening to Liberland presentation. It was like a sexual fantasy coming true. Why? Because he's just pure neoliberalism, emancipating all the previous nation-state problems in a wonderland of no man's land. And the question that came to my mind, if let's say those people were not European, were not Christians, or whatever they were Buddhist or Muslims, would Serbia, for example, send them the letter welcome, and you're welcome in our neighborhood if you need anything, and that stuff. So the main point I want to ask the honorable guests about is how many things is actually obscuring, covering the real power structures and guiding our attention to some things else, some things that just, it is fancy, it is benevolent, but at the end, it doesn't allude to the real struggle, to the real power structure. It will never make a real change as long as it is disconnected from the real power structures, hierarchies, interests, and so on.
Okay.
So
all right.
That's my question. I would like you.
All right. Let's take that and tie it a little bit, because I don't know if anyone can speak on behalf of the Republic of Serbia up here, but we definitely can try and take that and put it into a question of if you're a young person who's trying to launch a business project, the importance of connecting with versus competing with or fighting against, in some cases, for example, in the Arab world, the existing power struggle. Tariq, you want to have a go at that one?
I mean, you've highlighted to the extent that you have interpreted the question correctly, I think you are absolutely right. We do live in an Arab world, for example, right now, where governments are reasserting their power, reasserting their control, they're reasserting their ability to clamp down on the public. And they see sometimes entrepreneurs as being a threat to their legitimacy.
So is that squashing the space for entrepreneurs or opening different spaces?
So in some sense, that is squashing the space for entrepreneurs. But there is another reality that exists side by side in many parts of the Arab world, which is that in fact, most governments across this region right now are largely incapable or incompetent and are unable to do basic things such as public services, education, health, transport. I think entrepreneurs can step in and not necessarily challenge governments, but provide the answer to real practical needs that societies have. And Sami, there are at least 3-4 countries in the region, Libya, Syria, Yemen, where we have no functioning governments. And it's going to be up to communities, up to young people, to do everything to help organize, to help mobilize, to help provide services, to help provide the funding. So every crisis creates an opportunity. And in this context, in my opinion, yes, young people thinking, motivated, encouraged, but supported by others, can play a critical role in helping to reorganize that very power structure that you're concerned about.
That's a good point. All right, let's check in with Razan, and then we'll come to, we'll maybe go to the lady over there. If we can get a microphone to the lady in the blue dress. But Razan, have we got any more questions that we need to take?
Yes, we have a question. It's in Arabic, though, so I can read it out.
That's fine, we can translate it.
This question is from Hassan Al-Kilani on Facebook. He says, ما أهم الفرص الاقتصادية التي يمكن التركيز عليها في دول تعتمد على الاقتصاد الريعية وتفتقد إلى الاقتصاد النوعي والبيئية المتنوعة؟
Oh my God, now I said we can translate that. I'm going to need some help. So what are the best economic opportunities available, shall we say, for the youth in Arab countries? Because I can't even get into some of those terminologies that we use there.
I mean, he's asked a very general question about the best opportunities in countries that rely on natural resources, for example. Let's say countries in the Gulf that have a lot of oil, that provide a lot of that oil and distribute it to the public. How do you become an entrepreneur in that system? And I think that is a legitimate question. But we're seeing, just to be very brief, we're seeing already in countries like the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, we're seeing entrepreneurs emerge. We're seeing them come in and play a role, setting up businesses and services in some small industries, a lot of SMEs. These youth benefit from a lot of government support. The funding problem to some extent, some policies have been made. I am not so concerned about these countries. My biggest concern is about the large, complicated countries in our region that have socioeconomic problems, or the countries that have stopped functioning countries going through war, through destruction. Those countries, in my humble opinion, are the ones we need to think about. How can entrepreneurs step in, step up, and provide part of the answer to stabilization, to reconstruction, and to recreation of vibrant, dynamic societies?
All right, Yavuz, can I get you to have a stab at the answer to that question too?
Unfortunately, I have no experience on the Arab world's
You can talk
economical.
about the broader Sharq region then.
Yeah, but the thing that I can say very easily, as we say in the whole conference, now we are living in an internet area, so you don't have to do some inventions, you know. But the most important thing for the young entrepreneurs is the struggle and the challenge. A lot of media areas pushing them to invent something, but there is another way. They can develop a product which is existing. So it's very quick and very affordable way to start their own businesses. For example, as I know, in the Arab world, the importation is very high. So they have their very crucial products, which is inherent for their countries. So they can develop these products in spite of taking them from other countries.
Right.
So also Turkey has a good example on that. We have done this before. We shared our experience with the neighbor countries, and this industrialization process started like this. So Turkey can be an example how to start copying, imitating, or developing this type of production plan, we can say.
All right, the lady in the blue dress had a question.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My name is Zahra, and I appreciate the guests here, and I wanted to ask, now we are just fantasizing the youth to do a lot of things in their countries, but the problem in our origin that there is a stable countries, there is unstable countries, there is a lot of countries in our origin is going through wars and going with very crucial situation now. Now, like I'm one of the youths in unstable countries, so when I'm going to my country and there is nothing.
Which country are you talking about? This is interesting.
Yemen.
From Yemen?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think about Tariq's comment there a minute ago that in countries like Yemen, for example, he said that very collapse that we look at as a negative thing might be offering greater opportunity to the community for them to take on responsibility and entrepreneurial role. Tell us, if I'm curious, this is a brilliant, I think, interaction and conversation to know, do you think that's unrealistic of us? Or, you know, what's your perspective on that?
I don't know. I think it's...
Okay, there's no flights to Yemen. That's an issue.
Like, we have a lot of issues. Like, we asking from the youth to do something, but they can't do it. There is a lack of education. We have wars. We have a political bad situation. The old people leading the young people to the war, to the death. So I'm wondering, what could the youth do in these countries?
All right.
And how can the other countries, the stable countries, helping those youth to, come up and, recover from their injuries, from their war?
I'm curious to know, I mean, your thoughts on that. That's a good question. What can the youth do? It's easy for us to talk about, in a crisis is opportunity. Yavuz, you want to start with that, and then we'll go to Tariq?
Let's start with Mr. Tariq, because he's much more familiar at those situations, I think. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what you've said applies not just to Yemen, also applies to Syria at the moment. So in a lot of places in Syria, a lot of regions where there is no fighting, for example, there are a lot of needs to serve to help provide medical services for the injured, help rebuild homes, help provide schools, help all of this. Who's going to do it? The international community is either not interested or doesn't have money. It is going to be up to Syrians themselves. And in my view, what I was trying to say earlier, youth in particular, with their energy, with their imagination, can be bridges for providing part of the answer. Entrepreneurship doesn't have to be about becoming the next Steve Jobs. Entrepreneurship can be about setting up a small clinic where you connect with other youth around the world, and maybe some country will provide you with a donation, and you can bring in technology, as Yavuz emphasized, to do something dramatically improving in people's lives. Think about Yemen. What is the #1 problem in Yemen today? The biggest outbreak of cholera in modern history. Who's doing anything about this? The international community? Absolutely not. The warring factions? No. And nobody's even putting the money. But maybe young people using technology, working with foundations, working with others, can help provide the answer. How can you cure a problem like this quickly and do it at a scale that is reasonable? That is, I think, the idea, Sami, that I was trying to drive across. It's going to be up to youth to do this, working with communities. I'm sad to say this. 10 years ago, when we used to talk about entrepreneurship, it used to be about entrepreneurship being a business. Now, entrepreneurship has to be
Crisis
management, social services, rebuilding societies, healing people. You have an opportunity to do it. Now, it is your right to say, what are others doing to help me in this? I think this is maybe a problem that the Sharq Forum, another problem the Sharq Forum and others can help resolve. Where are the foundations? Where are the big Muslim governments? Where are the responsible charities? It is that ecosystem that I think can ultimately provide the answer.
This is great. This is really inspiring. I kind of feel like we need to think out of the box a little bit. I know that I'm glad to say I see a sea of hands up. Let's give an opportunity to some e-questions since we're in the e-era. Razan?
Yes, actually there's one question which ties in perfectly with the last question and with Tariq's answer. It's from Ask Kashmir on Twitter. She asks, can entrepreneurs afford being political activists in a region where governments crack down on any form of dissent?
Okay. Yavuz, you have a go at that one. I know your situation
These
in
are
Turkey
very
is a little
political
different,
and
but
hard questions, but we have a lot of
That's why you're
experience
here.
on that. Yeah, that's the point. We have an experience on that. For example, we had an issue like Gezi protests. Maybe all of you remember. So the power that drives this protests was the youth. And when we see the world in every place, in every problematic geography, we see youth is driving these chaos. You know, they are being used as a gun or as an equipment to light up the area. So the biggest point for the young people who is working in the social areas, in the NGOs, for me, this is my own opinion, but they have to absolutely stay away from the radicalization and the marginalization. So this is the key point. Because when they stay collective and when they stay calm, they can start to think about changing, you know. But the elder ones, the politicians, the capital holders, they like to support this chaos and use the youth. So
Right.
the
That's
important
a good one.
thing, is
So
to
don't fall into the margin.
yeah, that's true.
Find the margin. Don't fall into it.
But also, Sami, I don't think we want every youth in this room to be a business leader, a political activist, and a civil war warrior. Everyone will find their own vocation, their own passion, their own area of interest. We need, more importantly, everyone to be engaged. Now, just on the political question, because it's a very interesting one, you don't have to organize a protest to be effective. You can organize an online platform that brings voice, that shares issues, that discusses and allows for public debate to take place. You can also share experiences and become engaged with political campaigning, with voting, with a host of areas. Political mobilization is not only about toppling a government.
But maybe, Tariq, as well, do we need to think about it in a different way? The Arab world in particular has gone through this whole political, Arab Spring and experiment, and we think about, as you were saying, is protest only in the street or online? Maybe it's some of the points which both of you gentlemen were mentioning, by providing a service that the so-called central authority is failing to provide. Is that not, in a sense, it's a positive form of protest rather than a negative form?
I agree with you. I think that undermines the legitimacy of whatever government structure there is. And that with time will make more acceptable the idea that economic development and social development is bottom up. It is not coming from the top. It's not one man's vision. It's something that society has created. And I do not want to I cannot overemphasize what youth can do here. You don't have to look only at the
That's a good thought.
Yes.
We can't overemphasize what youth can do. I see a lot of gentlemen. Okay, who's got the mic then? Okay, can we get the mic? Let's give the gentleman here a chance. And then let's give a lady a chance after that. Do we have any ladies? Okay. Go ahead.
سؤالي في اللغة العربية.
تفضل باختصار لو سمحت. سؤال.
أنا شاب فلسطيني. مجموعة من الشباب العربي في اسطنبول أنشأنا منصة اسمها دت.
ماذا أنشأتم؟
منصة عربية اسمها دت.
لو تقرب المايك من فمك.
detplatform.com هي عبارة عن منصة شبابية. استطلقنا الفكرة من منصة تيدكس لنا تقريبا عامين في اسطنبول. حاولنا نتوسع للعالم الخارجي، ذهبنا إلى سوريا، الآن في خطة لفلسطين وعمان إن شاء الله رب العالمين. نحن كشباب مقيمين في اسطنبول ندرس، نعمل، نقتطع جزء من وقتنا، نقتطع جزء من مالنا من أجل تمويل هذه المنصة من أجل أن تكون ناجحة. هي عبارة عن منصة للشباب ولأفكار الشباب العربي. مشكلتنا الأساسية في توفير الدعم المادي دائما لهذه المنصة إن الدعم المادي مشروط من قبل المؤسسات في نقطة رقم 1. نقطة رقم 2 يعني نحن كأشخاص أو كشباب موجودين في مدينة اسطنبول هناك التزامات للحياة، للبيت، للدراسة، لا نستطيع دائما أن نفرغ كثير من وقتنا من أجل هذه المنصة دون
والسؤال
هو السؤال ما هي الطرق لتوفير دعم مالي لمؤسسات شبابية؟ نحن نطبق كل ما قلتوه. نعم استطقنا أخذنا فكرة غربية أجنبية وقمنا بتطوير عربيا وإضافة مواضيع جديدة لهذه المنصة. قمنا بالانتشار في العالم العربي ولكن حتى الآن لا نستطيع توفير الدعم المادي بسبب الشروط.
وصلت جزاك الله خير. The question that the gentleman is posing, he's a member of the Palestinian youth community here in Istanbul and he's formed the platform or forum, and he's explaining how difficult the challenge or the question is, how does one provide sufficient funding and resources, manpower resources, to keep an initiative like that going? Those are the sort of challenges he's facing. Who'd like to have a go at that?
We have a new system, for example, for that in Turkey. We have built up the policy, and now we are working on the details, which is, I think most of you know, the crowdfunding system. So, in fact, this is our culture. You know, this is an Eastern culture to support, to being partner, to share the income with the partners. So
I think we have a session about that after the lunch break as well, so you might want to hang around for that one. Maybe that will help. Go ahead, though.
For example, we are now working on a company which will do this crowdfunding service. And now Turkey has two working crowdfunding systems. And unfortunately, for now, it's only for the nationals. But I strongly believe that, like Kickstarter, which is located in America, now they are receiving projects from all around the world, most of the countries, we can say. So we should build up a service like this as the regional countries, Islamic countries, in fact. So the NGOs has a huge responsibility on that. So if we can create our crowdfunding system with some special cultural methods we will also be successful at this funding stage, we can say.
All right, I think we said we're supposed to be ending now, but the organizers said, can we go on for a little bit more? 5 more minutes. They've given us 5 more minutes. Let's give the lady a chance.
Okay.
And if there is time for maybe an e-question after that, we'll take it. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Asma Al-Kayali from Jordan. I'm a lecturer and trainer in business. I used to teach, I'm still teaching entrepreneurship for undergraduate. We heard a lot as a youth about Silicon Valley and the ecosystem that's supporting entrepreneurs and startups around the world, especially in America and US. But about the ecosystem in Arab region, we heard that youth want to start their own startups, want to niche and go and market and wide, but there's a lack of supporting where to go, how to go. There is no mentors, network supporting the entrepreneurs. So could we hear about a good base for Silicon Valley in Arab region? I don't know if you can. Thank you.
Okay.
أختي أسماء, I think I agree with you. What we have is not enough. Jordan actually is one of the better models in the region. There is a vibrant ecosystem. A lot of the funding we see and a lot of the companies that get publicity and get support happen to be companies where venture capitalists are interested in, or where the profit margins and the X plus is what is driving a lot of the interest. Now, that type of company, I think, is important. We need to have more of it, but I'm afraid it's not the answer. We cannot have too many, and we will not have unicorns in the quantity of size and scale that will be of interest. And those companies will not address the problems that I'm most concerned about right now. I think where we have seen no interest, and this is, again, quite sad. Talk about Muslims who are committed by virtue of our beliefs and our practices to philanthropy, to zakat, to charity, to helping the others. Most of our big Muslim businesses, big foundations, have done very little to support the ecosystem. You don't have to support the $1 million company. You can support the $100 entrepreneur who sells vegetables on the side of the road. I think it's those parts that are doable, that are available, but require leadership. Maybe a country like Turkey can play this big role, can lead. Malaysia, Turkey, Pakistan, Nigeria, and others. That, in my humble opinion, is what's going to be required to create ultimately the ecosystem that will have the scale to meet the size of the problem.
All right, we've got 2 minutes. There's a very brief e-question in and a brief answer, and then we'll have to wrap it up. But I'm delighted to see there's so many hands before lunch, when usually, there are other priorities. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay.
I will talk in Arabic if it's possible.
Okay, sorry, sir, but we just want to give a chance for an e-question from Razan, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Razan.
Yeah, so this is again a question which ties into the last answer. It's by Rashid. He says, should entrepreneurs use commitment to social justice as a USP and intertwine profit-making with moral obligation?
All right, we'll try and get how about a brief answer from that, and then we'll try and include the gentleman, since Sharq is about inclusivity afterwards. A brief answer, then we'll go to him. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the question.
Razan, can you repeat the question?
Because there is a reflection.
Should entrepreneurs use commitment to social justice as a USP and intertwine profit-making with moral obligation?
How can we go with that? For example, in my presidency years at Young Mushiat, we just focus on one big problem. The biggest mistake that we are doing in the entrepreneurial area is separating our motivation to some different areas. So we just focused on an exact area, and which we defined for Turkey, the partnership issue. Because when you look around the world, the biggest companies are are the companies which are built up like partnership method. So we just really motivated on that, and we got really good results. For example, more than 15 companies are built up, which is in this model, and now we are trying to improve this. So this is really giving some example to us to start something new.
All right, the gentleman, can you make it a very brief and quick question, sir?
اوكي I'm رواد صقر من ليبيا منسق ديوان طرابلس. عموما بمناسبة اني يعني انتمي من الجغرافيا الليبية، فيكون سؤالي تحديدا باعتبار ليبيا من الدول التي تعتمد على الاقتصاد الريعي من سنوات عديدة، فبالتالي هناك اختلاف على دول الخليج. فهنا السؤال كالتالي، يعني ما هي الطريقة التي ممكن لليبيا الآن تعتمدها في ظل يعني في توزيع الاقتصاد يعني وفي ظل الانقسام السياسي الآن والأزمة السياسية، ومع العلم أن ليبيا تتوفر على عدة مقومات منها الموقع الجغرافي والمساحة يعني أكثر من 2000 كيلومتر على البحر الأبيض المتوسط. وشكرا.
That's a very big question. I have a feeling if they had the answer to that, they would both be millionaires and I'd be friends with 2 millionaires. But I don't know if you want to, if we transform it into a brief answer about the role that the youth, the opportunities for youth in a situation like he's describing in the Libyan economic landscape. Very briefly.
Very briefly, I think the previous sessions, and this session as well, was trying to highlight a need and emphasize a role that youth can have across the Muslim world in most countries, regardless of the type of economic structure they have, the type of political problems they have. What we're calling for here when we talk about entrepreneurship is really about self-empowerment. It's about youth taking matters in their own hands, deciding their own future, pursuing their own opportunities. Yes, the obstacles might be different, the government support they will receive in a country versus another might be different, but fundamentally, this session is about youth empowerment, youth serving themselves and serving the larger public good. That is going to be good for Libya, it's good for Yemen, it's good for Saudi Arabia, it's good for Nigeria, and in every country in the future, in my humble opinion.
And that's good for us. Thank you very much to our panel for tackling those questions. I think we've learned, in summary, a lot of really good points. Find the gap, don't fall in it, believe in yourself, and keep in mind entrepreneurship means different things today. I'd add to that, you can become a citizen of an online country, we can eat crickets to save the world and the water resources of the planet, and don't buy your machinery from Upper Egypt. I think it's one of the lessons we've taken from the last few sessions today too. Thank you very much. We'll break now for lunch and see you afterwards.
Sami.